Hey guys, it's Mo from Mo in the Deep End, and I figured while we are waiting for the Carla Rentala case to possibly find their alternates or not, I would go through and I promised that I would look for more articles or information about BTK with the new revelations that are coming out and his age probably becoming a factor in getting some more victims justice. Figured I would bring some more articles to light, and it looks like there are some interesting articles from interesting sources. So I don't know a lot about Den of Geeks or Den of Geek, sorry, but looks like we've got a review of a new investigation discovery. Look, if it is a documentary about a serial killer, I am there. I have popcorn. I have the closed captions on, and Mr. Mo is slightly afraid because he's like, "Ma'am, you seem to only wanna watch, Snapped and things about serial killers. You are creepy." But we have a review of, uh, looks like a new, investigation discovery thing, and apparently they have a serial killer week. It's been so long since I've kind of cut the cord with cable that even though we have Hulu and all the things, I just pretty much stay on YouTube, so let's check it out. BTK Chasing a Serial Killer Review. A self-aggrandizing psychopath gets his wish. Investigation Discovery closes Serial Killer Week with an anonymous face that stands out in the crowd, BTK Chasing a Serial Killer. This woman is one of the, behavioral psychologist profilers that they always have. If you have watched these things like I do religiously, she always shows up. The other one who made fun of Dr. Beverly Lewis, I wanna say his name is Dolph Lundgren, but I know it's not. It will come to me as soon as I turn off this video, but any hoozle. Let's get into the article. Quote, "How many do I have to kill before I get a name in the paper of some national attention?" Dennis Rader asks early in the BTK Chasing a Serial Killer. The elusive stranger wanted to be a Hall of Famer along with Jack the Ripper and Son of Sam. He got off on the killings and wanted everyone to know it. Investigation Discovery closes out Serial Killer Week with a three-part documentary exploring the psyche of famous BTK killer and the devastating effects he had on the community around him. Like many of the murderers profiled during the week, BTK Killer escaped detection because there seemed to be nothing to detect. He was a normal guy who you'd never suspect, but underneath the facade was a man who saw himself as extraordinary and deserving of the legacy of dark celebrity. BTK, Chasing a Serial Killer, focuses on Carrie Rawson, Rader's daughter, who said she had no clue the man who raised her was, quote, "a monster in disguise," end quote. Although she makes it clear in the documentary how she had to maneuver her father, who she calls her best friend growing up, to keep him on his good side. The special includes detailed testimony from law enforcement, was working the case, as well as family of the victims and survivors. But Rawson's account brings a contrasting picture of the killer, who was as addicted to notoriety as he was to the killings and smexy pleasure that he got from them. Her memories flesh out the man who bragged to KAK TV in Wichita that he had Factor X, the exclusive ingredient only few true life monsters possess. The quote, Ghostbusters, end quote, task force assigned to the ghoulish killer take note of his desire for fame, gives him much more than 15 minutes. The special does a good job in presenting a mouse trap chasing its own tail. The narration is suitably dramatic, but not overly so, and quite a few of the network basic cable true crime documentary series. The narrator brings low-key gravitas to what are some of the grisly facts. Part 1 begins with the BTK killer's first murder, and this is the one that I find really fascinating. If you look at the BTK killings, if you look at serial killings, it's a really high high risk target. I don't think he thought that the husband and the son were gonna be there. I think he thought that only the wife and the little girl were gonna be there. So he goes in having, to subdue at least 4 people, and it it's a very odd way to start your career as a serial killer because usually there's sort of an escalation. So that is one of the things that really struck me as if you watch a lot of these documentaries, it's usually doesn't start with a family, but it is also heartbreaking because you on January 15th, 1947, he killed 4 members of the Ortero family. The story is told as a modern memory of a 10th grader who discovered the bodies. He said it felt like he having his heart pulled out from him physically, and the camera captures his continuing vulnerability. One of the revelations of the series is how everyone connected to with the BTK spree is an open wound. Steve Relford who was bound and helpless while his mother was murdered, says he now has multiple personalities. When asked if his life was changed by BTK, he says he lets himself slide into a lifetime of addiction that never would have happened if his mother was alive. He wears the psychic scars in an almost physical way. And really, this is, I think, part of the thing that we sometimes forget is there's the murder victim, and then there's the wake of victims around them, the family members, and even the members of the family. Take the, Long Island serial killer, I mean, his wife, his children right now, I mean, I can't imagine he seemed like a tyrant. I mean, if you see how his wife is and kind of the stories that are coming out, what she's had to deal with, and then realizing what her husband has done, and then all of those things, I mean, I can't imagine. I have lived through a situation where my world has just been blown apart, and I can't imagine living with that and then realizing that the person who has done it has also blown other people's worlds apart monstrously. I couldn't. BTK didn't only inflict excruciating brutality on his victims, he tormented police. Rader toyed with the authorities, starting by stashing a confession letter at the Wichita's Public Library in October. The budding serial killer called the Wichita Eagle and told them where to look. In the letter, he came up with several impressive and memorable monikers for himself. BTK stands for bind them, torture them, kill them. The special makes clear how methodically the cops were investigating, but the drama comes through the killer's own impatience. He writes letters, poems, draws pictures, explains how the X factor is a supernatural element, even names Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian, and Nancy Fox. So David Dennis Rader should have been caught so much earlier. He made so many mistakes. He left all sorts of clues. He wanted to be so famous, and it wasn't for the police lack of trying. He just I mean, he did it in different jurisdictions, the way that cops didn't one jurisdiction really didn't talk to the other one. I mean, with the ability to have hindsight and look back, you think, "Oh, well, why didn't they catch him then? He could have done this, he could have done that." I mean, I have sitting in my comfy, cushion lab seat, have a very easy perspective of saying, "Gosh, they should have caught him this, it would have been so easy," but back when the internet didn't exist and you didn't, just call up the other precincts and say, "Hey, did you see this, this, and this?" It's not as easy. BTK chasing a serial killer continues the enforcement dilemma during a 12-year gap in the killings, whether BTK was dead, in prison, out of town, or on the road. We get a terse explanation of a cold case, how cases of this magnitude, they never really close, just They're never really closed, just forgotten, which brings us back to the central drama. BTK did not want to be forgotten. And when he sees a newsy, quote, "whatever happened to," end quote, piece in local media, he decides to answer the question. The documentary definitely captures the escalation and braggadocio from drawing to photography. BTK posts 53-year-old victim Marianne Hedge in bondage positions at the Christian Lutheran Church weeks after killing her before dumping her body in a ditch. There are similar examples of his macabre presentation, and BTK Chasing a Serial Killer showcases the killer's portfolio expertly. BTK's killer spree ends with the killing of Dolores E. Davies, who was found in February 1991. The documentary turns this into a police procedural after BTK goes on a letter writing spree. He even tapes one to a stop sign. The special notes that this is where BTK makes his mistake by fudging the return address, but the reviewer sees another missed opportunity. Did BTK lick the stamps? This is one of the cases which spanned the pre and post DNA analysis era of crime fighting. The killer finished at the kill scenes from his earliest murders, but it didn't equal usable evidence. The documentary gets into how DNA testing was in its early stages. One cop says to get a sample, you had to ruin a whole lot of evidence. The cops go in a different direction. They pull hundreds of possible suspects to see if they could get a match for the newly admitted 1986 murder of Vicki Wegerle. The third installment is basically an inadvertent comparison between how organized the police can get and how sloppy BTK can get. Once the whole dragnet coalesces, the first thing the cops realize is that BTK isn't quite the mastermind they thought he was. He writes a poem threatening lead investigator Lieutenant Ken Landwehr, who has become the face of BTK Task Force, as well as a false autobiography. One of the things the elusive villain left was an outline for a proposed book title, The BTK Story. It opens with a chapter, A Serial Killer is Born. This man is ridiculous. Dennis Rader is absolutely a piece of trash, convicted piece of trash, but he was so eager to be famous. Had he just stayed quiet, and I'm glad he didn't, but had he just stayed quiet and faded out, I doubt they would have been able to figure out who he was. He blended in. There Had he not had this compulsion to make himself famous, I don't know that they would have found him. Barring advances in DNA to the point that they could have done again that I believe appendicitis, or maybe it was the pap smear DNA analysis where they ran it and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this kid definitely has BTK DNA with his daughter." The documentary has a wealth of gore material to choose from, but it has a field day with bound dolls. Between the length of time and the change in manpower it takes to finally catch the killer and the graphically detailed images of Barbies tied in intricate knots, the series has elements of the horrific Hunt for a Killer on True Detective Season 1. It adds subliminally conspiratorial dimension with a floppy disk, which BTK supplies to the police chief. Reel's Dennis Rader is actually the president of the church council at the Lutheran Christ Church. For the love of Cheetos, this man is the metadata moron. Look, I'm not smart, but when the police say, "Totally trust me, dude, we can't see your metadata, I promise." Your correct answer is possibly don't trust the police. BTK Chasing a Serial Killer is laid out in a boilerplate. Okay, so this just is kind of the review. It seems like it's gonna be a good one if you like. I am not using Brave for this because I have found out that Brave is good, but if you want to run a video on Brave, It will not play. So let me share BTK's daughter because I think it is, and I do hope that she is getting as much counseling and help as she needs. I know I don't. I have come to terms with the fact that I probably will eventually need to talk to someone with advanced degrees with all of the things that I've been through. But I really do, with what she's had to deal with her world being exploded, and um, I can't even imagine um, the loss of just grounding and your whole self that you would probably feel if you woke up if you went to bed one day and your life was normal and then you woke up the next day and your dad was BTK. I cannot even imagine the almost it would be like going to bed one night and your world had gravity and then waking up and you were weightless. I can almost just imagine that would be the kind of just paradigm shift that would have to go through. So I can only hope that she has gotten all the help and continues to get the help, and then I think she's helping with getting any sort of information about any more victims that her dad has before his time runs out, and if that's what's happening, then thank goodness for her. The daughter of BTK serial killer Dennis Rader did her first interview since news broke that he may be linked to more murders. Carrie Rawson explains on the podcast Surviving the Survivors she has not seen her father since 2005. Not only does she describe the condition he was in, but also the way he told her something that got her thinking. Last week, Oklahoma investigators dug up the ground where Rader's Park City home once stood. They say they are 100% sure that the killer had something to do with 16-year-old Cynthia Kinney's 1976 disappearance. Detectives also think he might have something to do with the murder of 22-year-old Shauna Garber in 1990. Fox News Kansas reporter Leon Purvis has more on the story. You can see that report posted in the video above. What the actual schmel? Okay, let's see if this will actually play without loading an ad.
The daughter of serial killer Dennis Rader did her first interview since news broke that he may be linked to more murders. Our Leon Purvis is here with the story. It's first on Fox.
Talking with the talking
Katie, Carrie Rawson explains on the podcast Surviving the Survivor she had not seen her father since 2005.
Well, I can't hear it, but let's see what I'm doing wrong. Nothing like technical difficulties for it to be a Mo production. Oh, come on now. Yes, you can too, Connect. You just did like 2 seconds ago. What is wrong with you? Okay.
Not only does
the daughter of serial killer Dennis Rader did her first interview since news broke that he may be linked to more murders. Our Leon Purvis is here with the story. It's first on Fox.
Katie, Carrie Rawson explains on the podcast Surviving the Survivor she had not seen her father since 2005. Not only does she describe the condition he was in, but also the way he told her something that got her thinking.
I go, "Is it 10, Dad?" And he goes, 10. And he rolls that 0.
Carrie Rawson recently asked her father, Dennis Rader, known as serial killer BTK, directly if he killed more than 10 people. She explains how she interpreted the role of the 0.
And now I'm thinking, good God, man, how many times are you rolling that 0? Because I think you're trying to tell me it's more than 10.
After 18 years behind bars and
yeah, I think it's gonna be higher, and this is my only thing with that is that As I said in the beginning, you don't generally start with a full family. Again, I am no FBI agent. I read Silence of the Lambs and I saw the movie. And can I just say that I much prefer Hannibal as the way they portrayed him and not a short man with an extra finger and maroon eyes. Thank you. Um, but yeah, I think that they're gonna find a lot of things in his past, just like Ted Bundy probably started when he was 13 or 15. There were, missing children in or at least I know one girl that went missing in the neighborhood that was never conclusively, linked to him, but there's a good chance that he was linked to her, if you catch my drift. So that's all I'm saying.
And convicted of killing 10 people, there's still a human element to Rader.
He was literally sobbing. He reached out for me. He hugged me. He kissed me.
Last week, Oklahoma investigators dug up the ground where Rader's Park City home once stood. They say they're 100% sure the killer had something to do with 16-year-old Cynthia Kinney's 1976 disappearance. Detectives also think he may have something to do with the murder of 22-year-old Shauna Garber in 1990.
And I said, hey, what do you think happened to Garber? And it was like that dad mask came off, and it was like BTK.
Ralston doesn't believe her father.
It's not dad claiming these. He is telling me directly that he didn't do these, and he's dodging. He's making up alibis. He's lying to my face.
When investigators found evidence at her family's former Park City home, Ralston says her father was speechless.
Interestingly enough, guys, he has not said one word since we dug up his precious yard. I think that's pretty telling. Like, I think he's shocked into muteness after 50 years.
Ralston also mentioned her dad is not allowed on the internet, social media, or email. He can only.
So I can't imagine how hard it is when you're being asked, and I don't know if they asked her to go in to help them or if she went in on her own. It seems like possibly it could be half a dozen of one, six of the other because he is getting older. And unfortunately, even if he is a monster, he's still her father, which sadly it it doesn't seem to get any easier, unfortunately. It your father is your father no matter what, or your mother, regardless of them being, not the greatest person. And then the last I have is from the New Zealand Herald. So, I'm trying to get my news from interesting sources and diverse sources. So, infamous BTK serial killer reveals what drove him to torture and murder 10 people or more. And I'm going to go ahead and lean on more just because serial killer Dennis Rader revealed what drove him to murder his 10 victims as he opened up about his brutal crimes and childhood in a newly unearthed and previously unheard recorded interview soon after he confessed 13 years ago. Dennis Rader, now 73, murdered 10 people, including 2 children in Wichita, Kansas, over a 17-year stretch between 1974 and 1991. The killer, who called himself BTK for Bind, Torture, Kill, was arrested in 2005 and is currently serving 10 consecutive life sentences in Kansas prison. Rader is now the subject of a new Oxygen documentary titled Snapped. Wait, Dennis Rader got his own Snapped episode? That is for women only, sir. We get daggone only women get Snapped episodes. I call party foul right away. Notorious BTK serial killer, which includes never before heard interview he gave to a local television reporter after he confessed to the murders. How could a guy like me, a church member, raised a family, go out and do these sorts of things? He told KAKTV or KAKE TV reporter Larry Hetberg in the interview, "I want people of Central County, the United States, and the world to know that I am a serial killer." Well, sweetie, we know. Okay, we figured it out. He went on to describe what urged him to kill. Personally, I think, and I know it's not very Christian, but I actually think it's a demon. That's what's within me. Sir, I'm gonna go ahead, like, I joke about not being a very good Christian. I'm gonna go ahead and say, like, you should also be wearing Crocs when even attending nearish, like, in the same zip code of a church, okay? Like, I joke and say I wear Crocs going into church because I joke that I'm a bad Christian. Like, sir, if you are anywhere nearish, like 50 yards of a church, sir, you should continue to wear your plastic slides, okay? At some point and time, it entered me when I was young. He drank the tap water in Flint and basically controlled me. When asked if he had any feelings for his 10 victims, Rader replied, "Yes, I do. I mean, I have a lot of feelings for them." Oh, for flip's sake, of course he does. Probably more like, "Yeah, that was fun. I had fun doing that. I really wish I could have done better." Feelings, like human feelings. Does he have human feelings would have been the better question. I guess it's more of achievement for this object in a hunt. It's more or sort of more of a high, I guess. Okay, sir, maybe you shouldn't talk. Rader, who was a former church leader and hid his killings from his wife and 2 children, has also revealed in the interview he started noticing his dark side back in the 8th grade, early teens. He had previously said that lust and desire for fame and power drove him to murder. Rader aided authorities for 3 decades, but continuously taunted the police about the killings, which eventually led to his downfall. Yes, because he didn't realize that floppy disks have metadata, which I wouldn't have known either, but I'm also not taunting the police with my crimes, because I'm not a dumbass. Also, I don't have crimes. He started communicating with Wichita police via a floppy disk, and authorities ended up tracing it back to his church. Also, he believed the effing police when they said, "No, for serial, we don't know how to track metadata." Rader worked with Catherine Ramsland, a forensic psychology professor at DeSales University, to publish a book, Confessions of a Serial Killer: The Untold Story of Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer, about his crimes in 2016. She wrote the book under an agreement that the proceeds of the sales go to the victim's family trust fund. In it, Rader confessed to having plans to kill an 11th victim by hanging her upside down in her home before he was arrested. Well, what a moron. Rader wrote 3.5 pages of the book about his plans for his last kill. This was supposed to be my opus, my grand finale, and to make it different, I would set the house on fire using propane canisters, he wrote. He said he'd gotten into the woman's backyard. He he said he got into the woman's backyard and knocked on her door, but aborted his plan when a street crew showed up unexpectedly to work outside the house. Rader planned to kill her the following spring, but was arrested February 20 or 2005. Wichita police detectives who captured Rader in 2005 said they were incensed by his pride he exhibited as he divulged details about the tortures he planned to inflict on the 11th victim. Police had heard the story from Rader himself in 2005, but decided at the time to suppress the information to protect the woman. For him to reveal this information now is cruel, Tim Ralph, a former BTK task force investigator, said when the book was released. The police said they suppressed most of the detail of the planned murder for 11 years because they feared what the shock of the public revelation might do to the woman. But authorities did inform the woman after finding out the defense attorneys for Rader had hired investigators who might contact her. The he you know, this woman didn't even know she's a victim. She's over here just probably just looking at cat videos on Facebook, going around trying not to let people test the Jesus in her, going around, just trying not to eat all the carbs, trying to do good, trying to be right with the Lord, trying not to get on her own damn Snapped episode, and then some idiot is trying to go murderate her. Cannot with I would do you know, I would have, like, 8 dogs, they'd all be huge. I'd name them after what I don't all Futurama characters. I'd have the entire crew, and y I'm not saying that I'd have the house from Home Alone, but I'd never leave my house again. Quote, "She's a pretty tough lady, but this shook her up quite a bit," Ralph said. Well, yeah, I would be shook up. Following his arrest, several of the victims' relatives sued Rader and secured a settlement that agreed he could never profit from his crimes or coverage of them. I generally thought that that was pretty much a law, but I guess that's maybe, um, something that has to go state by state, but I guess I thought that was a Son of Sam law, but maybe that's only in New York, so maybe they had to make it with, just this law, but what a slimy guy, and, sir, if I could I know you're not gonna listen to me, I'm just a Mo on the internet, but and I know that you probably, while you're not listening to circus music in your head that says, "I am great and everything is awesome" from the Lego Movie playing in your head a la Sarah Boone, um, listen, you're getting older. Them, judgment days, should you believe in them, are going to be coming fairly soon. Now, the Lord will forgive you. The rest of us think you're an asshole, okay? But you could do something slightly redemptive and at least give yourself a little bit of redemption and tell these families, tell the rest of these people where their children are, what you did with them, and at least give that little bit of peace back or take credit. If you're that much of a douche canoe, take credit. Get all the credit you can get, because I'm sure Lucifer would love to know just how many, nameplates to have on your little cellular area that, your little "I am great" sign in hell, okay? I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know what you believe, but sir, you is getting old. Just confess. Get as famous as you are here, 'cause I don't know about y'all, but he could be looking at some heatness. Well, that is all for this story. I do have, I was able to dig up a lot of stuff on, different things, and my next video will probably be about Anna Kendrick. Her first directorial debut is all about Richard Alcala, and he is the serial killer that debuted or was on the dating show, The Dating Game. So, he was actually one of the weirdos who actually represented himself, so I'll be doing a little bit of a video on him next, and then don't forget that tonight at 7, we will be doing our first evening news you never needed and the newsiest news ever. So, it's a little bit of a palate cleanser, it's a little bit of a tough Monday, but we can have a little bit of fun news, a little bit of interesting news, and have a little bit of fun before you go to bed. If you're like me and you're old, you don't see past 9 o'clock usually, so 7 it is. And as always, we are welcoming here. Please like and subscribe, tell your friends, share, and do all the YouTubey stuff, and I will see you all later next video. Have a great evening.